In the previous episode, Li Shulai noticed a beautiful girl with white hair. The girl, feeling his gaze, looked at him and asked, "Is there something on my face?" Li Shulai didn't reply, but instead walked closer to her with a gentle smile. The girl blushed and quickly turned her head to the side, avoiding his eyes. Up next, everyone cheered and continued drinking. Li Shulai, unable to refuse, joined in and drank with them. The white-haired girl, uninterested in the revelry, remained engrossed in her book. After finishing her reading, she tried to wake her father, who had gotten drunk and fallen asleep. "Dad, wake up," she said, shaking him gently. However, he grumbled, "Let me sleep a little longer. Don't talk." The girl frowned, frustration mounting. She needed to tell her father something urgent, but he refused to listen. Confused and unsure of what to do, she looked around for help. Uncle Wang was asleep, and so were the others. Worried, she thought, "What do I do now? I really need to go to the toilet." Her face turned red as she realized she didn't know where the toilet was. Li Shulai noticed her troubled expression and thought, "She's been reading that book with her head down since I came in. Is she too shy to ask for directions?" Then it hit him. Does she need to go to the toilet? Why is she acting like a little kid? The girl suddenly heard footsteps approaching. Panicking, she thought, "Who's coming? Please help me." It was Li Shulai. He hesitated before asking, "Do you want to go to the bathroom with me?" As soon as the words left his mouth, he froze, horrified. "What am I saying?" he thought. "Am I drunk already? This is the most embarrassing thing I've said in 2 lifetimes. A grown man inviting a young girl to the toilet. What was I thinking?" To his shock, the girl, with a trembling expression, whispered. Li Shulai blinked, stunned. "Did I hear that right?" he wondered. What did you say?" he asked. The girl, her face flushed red with embarrassment, stammered, I really can't hold it anymore." Scratching his head awkwardly, Li Shulai thought, "Good grief, I did hear her right." He finally said, "Then I'll lead the way." The girl stood up and nodded. "Let's go." Li Shulai felt both embarrassed and oddly pleased. "This is such a strange experience," he thought, as they began walking towards the toilet. Along the way, the girl nervously glanced around at the many people still present. Her anxiety was evident. Li Shulai noticed her unease and thought, "She must have social phobia." "Don't walk so fast," she suddenly said, her voice quiet and hesitant. Li Shulai slowed his pace, realizing her fear. She really does have social phobia. It's like I'm a teacher, escorting a child on an outing. When they finally reached the toilet, Li Shulai said, "Go ahead. If I finish first, I'll wait for you outside. Don't worry." His words seemed to comfort her, and she entered the toilet, her face red with embarrassment, but relieved. While waiting, Li Shulai couldn't shake the awkward thoughts in his mind. What a strange situation, accompanying a girl to the toilet. This whole thing feels so bizarre. Moments later, the girl emerged, surprised to find him still waiting for her. She gave him a small smile and said, "We can go back now." Li Shulai smiled back. "Let's go," he replied. The girl quietly followed him, keeping close. Feeling awkward, Li Shulai decided to break the silence. He turned to her and said, "By the way, I'm Li Shulai." His sudden introduction startled her, and she trembled slightly. "I already heard it," she stammered, her voice barely audible. Li Shulai leaned closer and asked the white-haired girl, "What do you like to watch? I noticed you were reading earlier." The white-haired girl hesitated for a moment, before nervously replying, I like fantasy novels." Li Shulai raised an eyebrow, both surprised and slightly puzzled. "That's it? Is this what people talk about these days?" he thought. "Do I have to tell her I'm cultivating immortality just to pique her interest?" However, seeing her shy expression, he sighed internally. Pressing her to talk seems to make her uncomfortable. The two continued walking together in silence. For Li Shulai, it felt oddly unnatural. "In this life, I've never been this quiet before," he reflected. "Even quieter than when I was crushed to death by a crane." When they returned to the gathering, the white-haired girl smiled softly and returned to her seat. Li Shulai, heading toward his own chair, caught a glimpse of the book she had been reading earlier, The Princess in Distress and Benevolent Men. His sharp eyesight had unintentionally given him a clear view of the cover. "I didn't mean to see it," he thought defensively. "It's not my fault I have such good eyesight." Still, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself. So this is the kind of fantasy novels girls her age enjoy. Later, as the party came to an end, people began leaving for their homes. Li Shulai helped a heavily intoxicated Professor Guo to his feet and prepared to escort him home. Just as he was about to leave, a timid voice called out to him from behind. He turned to see the white-haired girl, looking nervous but determined. "Will you come to eat with us next time?" she asked, gathering her courage. Li Xiulai was caught off guard, but quickly responded, I'm about to graduate soon, and am busy looking for a job. There might not be many opportunities for us to meet again. The girl's face fell, disappointment evident in her expression. Noticing this, Li Xiulai added with a small smile, but if you want to hang out, you can always come to Hangzhou University. We can meet there. Her face lit up, and the air around them seemed to brighten with her happiness. Really? She asked, her voice filled with excitement. Li Xiulai nodded, before helping Professor Guo into a taxi. As they rode back, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the business cards he had collected from various people at the party. By attending one dinner party, you can collect the contact information of so many influential people. No wonder some people will go to great lengths to be invited, he thought. These cards may not seem useful now, but who knows what opportunities they might bring in the future. He recalled the events earlier in the evening, where a group of older men had enthusiastically proposed forming a sworn brotherhood with him. One of them, clearly drunk, had declared, "Let's become sworn brothers tonight. If you don't recognize me as your brother, you won't leave this room." Another chimed in. In ancient times, there was the story of the three brothers of Peach Garden. Tonight, we'll create our own oath of brotherhood with Brother Li. They all raised their glasses, shouting, "Drink! If you don't drink, you're not giving us face." Li Xiulai reluctantly joined in, sharing a toast with them. Looking back on it, he couldn't help but smile wryly. Everyone was drunk and acting outlandishly. By morning, most won't even remember their so-called brotherhood or any of the promises made. Connections like these are superficial unless you demonstrate real value. Only then will they take you seriously. Otherwise, it's all for show. Having lived a previous life filled with experiences of human nature's ups and downs, Li Xiulai was unfazed. He carefully stored the business cards. They may prove useful someday. As he leaned back in the taxi, his thoughts drifted to the future. My involvement will undoubtedly accelerate the rise of the internet business. People like Lu Daxi must already be feeling the pressure. Why hasn't he approached me yet? Is he holding back, or did he misplace my business card? The next day at the university, Professor Guo addressed the class with a serious tone. The date for the graduation defense has been confirmed. June 20th, next Friday. Everyone should finalize their thesis, revise diligently, and prepare for the defense. If you don't, you risk failing at the last minute and delaying your graduation. The announcement sent waves of anxiety through the classroom. Zheng Ming, looking panicked, turned to Li Xiulai. "Brother Xu, what do you think I should do about my paper? Professor Guo said my thesis was absolute garbage. He even called it a piece of mud that can't be propped against a wall. What should I do? This is the best I can manage. At least I wrote it myself. They can't really fail me by... right?" Li Xiulai, without hesitation, replied bluntly, "They really can." Zhang Ming gaped in disbelief. "Brother Xu, you're crushing me here." Li Xiulai shrugged and said calmly, "I'm just being honest. In my previous life, after what happened with Professor Guo, the graduation defenses that year were incredibly lenient, and even then, I nearly failed to graduate. Now that Professor Guo has been cleared and is back in his position, do you really think your current thesis will pass? Not a chance." Zhang Ming slumped in despair, tears welling in his eyes. "What should I do now, Brother Xu?" he pleaded. "Serve cold," Li Xiulai replied, without emotion. Zhang Ming dropped to his knees in mock desperation. "Brother Xu, please have mercy. Your paper has already passed. I've been your loyal friend through thick and thin all these years. Even if I don't deserve credit, I've at least worked hard, haven't I? Save your brother's life." Seeing Zheng Ming's dramatic plea, Li Xiulai finally relented with a sigh. "Go to the library later, and I'll help guide you through it." Zhang Ming's face lit up. Overcome with joy, he attempted to kiss Li Xiulai's cheek, exclaiming, "Brother Xu, I love you so much." Li Xiulai pushed him away in irritation. "If you disgust me again, I'll change my mind." Meanwhile, at the university dormitory, Liao Kexin stood waiting for Li Xiulai. Unbeknownst to her, Xiao Ning and her friend were watching from a distance. Xiao Ning's friend whispered, "She looks so elegant, like she's waiting for her boyfriend to come downstairs. Isn't this the dorm where Li Xiulai lives?" Hearing this, Xiao Ning's expression darkened. Her frustration grew when Li Xiulai came downstairs and walked over to Liao Kexin. "Look, it's Li Xiulai!" her friend exclaimed. "Oh my God, he's actually going out to eat with her. Are they really dating?" Fuming, Xiao Ning spat. "Follow them. I want to see how long this lasts." The two girls trailed behind Li Xiulai and Liao Kexin, watching as they entered a restaurant together. Inside, after ordering their food, Liao Kexin turned to Li Shulai and said, I came to find you because I've written a new short story. I wanted you to take a look. Li Shulai's eyes lit up with excitement. Let me read it right away, he said enthusiastically. The feeling of being friends with an idol is incredible, he thought. Getting exclusive updates and access to new work firsthand? Amazing. As he began reading the story, Liao Kexin watched him, her heart swelling with joy. There are stars and oceans in his eyes, she thought. To be acknowledged like this, it's such a wonderful feeling. From a nearby table, Xiaoning seethed with anger as she watched their interaction. Slamming her chopsticks on the table, she hissed, Ah, these shameless lovebirds are such an eyesore! Her friend, noticing her trembling with rage, asked cautiously, Are you okay? You look really upset. Xiaoning's thoughts spiraled into frustration. Li Shulai didn't even glance at me. Just now, I walked right past him with a plate, and he acted like I didn't exist. Like I'm invisible. Are those pieces of paper she writes on really that captivating? How could he be so drawn to her writing? Her jealousy simmered as she glared at the pair. What does she have that I don't? She wondered bitterly. Liao Kexin felt elated as she watched Li Shulai engrossed in her story. Knowing that someone genuinely appreciated her work brought her immense joy. Similarly, Li Shulai, thrilled to have the opportunity to read his favorite novels before anyone else, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The two of them, sitting together and enjoying each other's company, seemed perfectly suited for one another. From across the room, Xiaoning watched the scene with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. How dazzling, she thought, slamming her chopsticks onto the table. Her thoughts spiraled. Even if you don't like me anymore, how could you treat me like this? Am I not your niece? With our relationship, is it necessary to act as though we're strangers? Xiaoning's friend, noticing her mood, thought to herself, if she cares this much about him now, why didn't she cherish their bond earlier? She sighed, understanding Xiaoning's regret. Xiaoning, still lost in thought, muttered bitterly, So, are you trying to please Liao Kexin so much that you're willing to cut ties with everyone else? Her friend, seeing her intense gaze fixed on Li Shulai, said, Stop looking. Focus on something else. What are you planning to do after graduation? Snapping out of her thoughts, Xiaoning replied, I'm planning to take the postgraduate entrance exam. Her friend looked skeptical. Isn't it too late to start preparing now? Xiaoning explained, I plan to spend a year with my grandfather after graduation and prepare during that time. What about you? Her friend smiled and said, My family used some connections to get me a job as a teller at a bank. Despite the conversation, Xiaoning's attention returned to Li Shulai and Liao Kexin, who were chatting and laughing. She suddenly asked her friend, Don't you think Liao Kexin is actually quite impressive? Her friend looked confused. What do you mean? Xiaoning sighed. I mean, she's not as good-looking as me, and her family background isn't as strong as mine, but she's well-read, elegant, and talented. Everyone in her class praises her writing skills, and her articles have even been published in magazines. She paused, deep in thought. Could it be that this is what Li Shulai likes? Women who are knowledgeable and cultured? She frowned, remembering his words. He always said I was too narrow-minded. Last time, he told me to study harder and focus on my academics. Is it because he met Liao Kexin that he thinks I'm not good enough? Her face flushed as she recalled him saying, We're just a master's uncle and his niece. There's nothing more between us. The silence at their table grew awkward as Xiaoning became lost in her thoughts, blushing furiously. Her friend, noticing her shifting emotions, raised an eyebrow. Your mood swings are insane. Are you losing it? Blushing harder, Xiaoning stammered, Forget it. He's nothing special. His family is ordinary, and he's not my ideal partner anyway. Her friend laughed. I'm glad you can think that way. She then changed the subject. By the way, Xiaoning, have you heard of Feilong Technology? Xiaoning nodded. Of course. It's one of the leading internet companies, rated as the most promising in the market. Its current valuation is over 500 million, and it's expected to be among the top 3 companies in the country within 3 years. It's based in Hangzhou. Her friend added, Did you know the monitor recently got an offer from Feilong Technology? He's been so ecstatic that he hasn't been able to sleep for 2 days. Xiaoning raised an eyebrow. That's great news for him. Why bring it up? Her friend hesitated before saying, While I was job hunting, I came across a list of Feilong's main creators. There's someone named Li Shulai on that list. It's funny, right? One Li Shulai is from an ordinary family, penniless. The other is a shareholder of a listed company worth tens of millions, and likely to reach billions in the future. Such a stark contrast, don't you think? Irritated, Xiaoning snapped. He's not that bad? Her friend, startled by her reaction, muttered, "A woman's heart really is like a needle at the bottom of the ocean." Xiaoning, however, knew the truth. He's not just an ordinary man, he's a cultivator. Compared to others, he's far superior. For cultivators, money is insignificant. He has incredible talent and limitless potential. Her expression grew melancholic as she thought, "Meanwhile, I haven't even stepped into the world of cultivation. He's progressing so rapidly." She sighed and said aloud, "He may come from a humble background, but he's academically brilliant, and the only one to have passed the graduation thesis defense. He's righteous, helps others, isn't bad-looking, and he even cooks well." Realizing she was listing his strengths, she stopped abruptly. "Why am I doing this?" she wondered. Her friend smirked. "Wait a second. Have you ever even tasted his cooking? How do you know it's good?" Xiaoning, her face bright red, stammered, I must have heard it somewhere." Her friend teased, "Oh, I heard you loud and clear. You slipped up." Flustered, Xiaoning hurriedly changed the subject. "Let's eat quickly," she said, trying to avoid further embarrassment. Meanwhile, Li Xulai had just finished reading Liao Kexin's short story. Tears welled in his eyes as he thought, "This is truly incredible. The simplicity of handwritten words carries such a profound emotional depth. If there were a triple-like button, I'd press it. More importantly, perhaps my encouragement helped unlock her potential. In my previous life, I never encountered this story. Confidence really is the first step toward creation." "Teacher Liao!" he exclaimed, his excitement overflowing. "This story is amazing. When will it be submitted for publication? I want to buy a copy immediately." Liao Kexin blushed. "Why are you suddenly calling me Teacher Liao? Just call me Kexin." Li Xulai apologized. "I was just too excited. The ending was so touching." Blushing harder, Liao Kexin stammered, You don't need to go that far. The ending is a bit sentimental, but not that much, right?" Before she could finish, Li Xulai grabbed her hands and said earnestly, "Teacher Liao, this story is truly a masterpiece. It's timeless. You must submit it for publication immediately. It deserves to be shared with the world." Embarrassed, Liao Kexin quickly pulled her hands back and said, "What you're saying makes me feel so flustered.